Welcome to The Hook, episode 52. Episode 53 will be right behind this one. This is going to be pretty awesome just to talk about undefeated. Eagles 8-0 under Coach Gary Gold. Shout out to him. Whatever he's done, man, with this Eagles squad, they haven't had a letdown. You might have a letdown within a game, but they will be able to take hold within that game, use their success or failure recovery systems, and come back out on top, which is what occurred over this tour. We're really not going to focus mostly on the Russia match that occurred the Canada match that occurred last weekend. It's going to focus on all three games, but something to think about. We scored 134 points across 3 games. Wow. That is just awesome. Beating Russia 62-13, Scotland 30-29, and Canada 42-17. Talking about some players and what the MLR did versus this versus that. Well, something to look at across 3 matches. We scored second every time. In the first match, we scored pretty fast. Compared to the others, I would say. We scored here in this one against Russia at the 11-minute mark. They scored first at the 3-minute mark, but that was their only try of the match. Against Scotland, our first score was an Aj MacGinty penalty at 17 minutes. Against Canada, we scored a try from Cam Dolan at 22 minutes as our first score. Something to think about there. However, for both the games against Russia and Scotland, the first score of our opposition was a try. Against Canada, it was a penalty by Shane O'Leary at the 17-minute mark. To look at our possession versus stats sides, let's take a look at this overall. It gets pretty interesting if you want to analyze that. So, against Russia, our possession was 90-10. Wow. Think about that. That is ridiculous. We had 597 meters versus 276 meters compared to them. We had more passes, we had more runs, and but we had less kicks. So we sort of lost the kicking game in this one. And then looking at it against against Scotland, I keep wanting to do the Scotland match last. Our possession was pretty even. We had 48% of the possession, and they had 52%. However, if you look at this, it was a very close game, but they had 55% of the territory, outgaining us by 44 meters. So, there's that to take into consideration. And then let's look at the Canada when it comes to possession versus meters. So we had 75% of the possession. They had 25%. We actually gave up a lot of meters run to them. They had 426 meters run versus our 500. What that says right there, if you look at that stat, is that we played great defense in this game. Great defense in this game. Now let's talk a little bit about the MLR. Let's talk about how the selection went for this match, or this tour, really. When it comes to this team. Not a single player on the original roster announced, which included Callum Black, formerly of Ulster, now Worcester, who just decided not to represent his country. And I'm going to say that because he is an American. He was born in Washington, D.C., and his parents moved back to the U.K. Fine, good on them. But he grew up in London, if I have it right, and then qualified for Ireland on residency through playing for Ulster. But just withdrew, which is what it is, but not really cool. It would have been helpful to have him as a loosehead for a professional loosehead who's played as much as he has. I think that would have shored up our prop position a lot. So MLR. Were players selected on MLR form? Sort of, yes, maybe. I can tell you that every single match film is analyzed, and then the coaches all watch the match film, which is helpful. You can do that in a day with how it's broken down. But next year it's going to be more interesting. Coaches are going to have to spend a lot more time to analyze this. But if you look at how it was explained by Gary Gold, he really only watched 2 weeks of match film before he made the call roster with Director of High Performance and General Manager Alex MacGinty and Dave Hodges specifically. So 2 weeks is how they judged MLR form. The point is that play good rugby, play at a high standard. And the highest standard of rugby you can play currently in the United States is Major League Rugby. So you will play those that are capped are expected to play at the highest standard. But MLR isn't going to be the definitive competition, at least for a few years, based on the coaches and GM's comments that I can surmise. But based on selection, it's either play overseas or play in the MLR. So some guys who were recently capped who aren't playing in the MLR will either have to go find a team in the MLR or play overseas, which I agree with. And, that sucks for some guys who work in the tech industry that have been capped, work in the banking industry that have been capped. But if you desire to be one of those guys, that's fine. I think another thing to go into that is if it's an exhibition team that is going to become that is an expansion team the next year, I think that kind of exemption needs to fit in there. But let's look at the players in the MLR and how they were selected based on form. The only two players that were selected purely based on form in Major League Rugby was first Paul Mullen on preseason form with the Houston SaberCats, and as we could see how his contributions to the Eagles, starting all 3 matches during the summer tour and just crushing it at tight head, great. And then in week 6, Vili Toluta'u was called into camp in place of Tony Lamborn, which was really awesome that a guy that has been playing at such a high level. He was originally signed at hooker for the Seattle Seawolves. However, due to injury, he started at 7 a lot. And he was just crushing it, was named MLR Player of the Week. And he debuted, earning his first cap against Canada, playing very well, and really kind of got robbed on a trot. So when it comes to what the MLR has done, it has generated the best level of competition you can play in the United States. It has gotten guys into match form. I would say we're about 2/3 of the way there when it comes to our match fitness, partially because the MLR has a lot less games than other competitions. But that's okay, because next year the thing is expanding. So those are the 2 guys that were selected purely based on MLR form. And then we've got a bunch of other guys who are MLR players who just showed out. Let's get into – so cap during the ARC was Paul Asike. He was out there playing 60 to 70 minutes each one of these matches. I don't think he's there just yet. I think, we will see what Paul Asike can do in November. I think he's close. It's at like 90% of what this guy can do. And what Paul Asike can do now is a lot. He's a hard runner. He tackles very hard. He completes a lot of his single tackles. And, it takes 2 to 3 guys to take him down. He can offload very effectively. If you didn't see that. And then you can just take the tackle when you're trying to drive the tackle rate for the other team through the roof to work on their fitness against yours. So that's Paul Asike. Wow. Then you had him playing alongside Bryce Campbell. Great right there. Love that. Henko Hamishas. His work rate is everywhere. You're seeing him play for the Austin Elite. He's doing great. out there. And let's see. The one player I thought should have gotten selected that plays for an MLR team that didn't is Matt Jensen. His form as a lock has been great, so that kind of hurt me a little bit. Cam Dolan, another MLR guy, should have never been cut from Cardiff. I understand because of EU restrictions and whatnot, but he is that good to be playing, and he had a hat trick against Canada. So how do we look at this game? Well, one of the things I want to stop when it comes to all three of these matches is letting the other team score first. However, we look at the recovery system in place. Well, it doesn't really matter if the other team scores first because we're like, switch on. Already playing at an intense level, we just ratchet it up again. So when it comes to this team, we're using really a base 1-3-3-1 attack. We're using a bit of a blitz defense, which is great. And then for the most part, when we recycle on our zonal defensive concepts in rugby and our man defensive concepts, we're between the 5 meter and the try line, you can't get through. You can't get through. So most teams are having to score from far out, which is great for us. That's what we need. What I didn't like in some of these games, especially against the one against Scotland, is that we had to score from far out. We did not attack enough. I understand that a win was not in the KPI, but we got the win, so who cares, right? To the whole staff, Chris Hansen, Coach Gold, Sean Pittman, Scott Lawrence, what's up, buddy? And then Greg McWilliams, you guys done a great job. Now on to guys outside of the MLR, because I got to say this. The Little Wizard. And if I get any flack for calling Sean Davies the Little Wizard, it came straight out of Will McGee's mouth. I heard it in my ear as he was talking to Matt McCarthy. So blame Will McGee for giving Sean Davies that nickname. Sean Davies, starting 9, next 2 years, maybe next 3 years. There's just so much different compared to where he is versus the next guy, whether that is young Ruben DeHaas, who's going to get up there fast, or Nate Augsburger right now. I think Nate Augsburger, as we've seen, anytime you give him the ball, something happens. So him playing 11 or 14, he's kind of earned a place on the roster, which is fine. He can play wing, and in a pinch, he can play scrum half. So, I mean, that's where the scrum halving depth chart is right now. Sean Davies, Ruben Haas, Nate Augsburger. Will Hooley, now getting into non-MLR guys. Will Hooley, as an attacking fullback, that's a great option. He played very well during this series, especially keying off of Aj MacGinty. When you look at AJ and how he's played over the entire series this summer, he is on a different level than he's been in several years. And I think that leads down to he was all out for about 6 weeks with Sale. He got an MCL injury, and that took him out of the ARC. I think he was only going to play 1 or 2 games. But that took him out. That's fine. But he was a man on fire during this entire series. He is at his best right now. And I think this best is going to last like 2 or 3 years. And what you get after that ends is still going to be one of the top fly halves in the Premiership. He is on form. Marcel Brocky, Western Force. He can play wing. He can play center. He can probably play some fullback. But man, he is a physical beast. This is how big our back line is. Marcel Brocky, Paul Lasike, Bryce Campbell, Blaine Scully, and Will Hooley. The only one short, I guess, is Paul Lasike, who's like 5'10", but he's built like a brick house, like 250 pounds of just rippling muscle. So we've had a great season. I can't wait for the end of the MLR season to give these guys some off time before they start ratcheting it up for November and preseason next year. I'm Aaron Castro for The Hook, number 52. I'll be right back 53, just looking at the MLR games this last week.